So today I'm going to be commentating an 80-minute leveling path to Piety that follows the steps we take to set up our LightningSlinger character, which we will eventually transition to Stormbrand. The hardest part of leveling a LightningSlinger is actually the part that comes before LightningSlinger. This is probably one of the more complex leveling paths I've played, and it's certainly somewhat slower to do the first 3 acts compared to a lot of other skills. As we come to Hillock here, we're not going to do anything particularly special, we're just going to attack him. Once he phases, we can pretty much just stand still and pop flasks to keep alive. This just makes the fight a little easier. It's not really optimal or anything. You can go around him and micromanage your character if you don't want to take the risk. When he dies, hold down shift and pick up all his items so that we can vendor everything for additional materials. Now, we want a blue-blue-green wand if possible here. That will allow us to link Onslaught to Frost Blink and Frost Bomb. It doesn't really matter if we don't get it, but we're going to try. So in this run we did get one. The other one we get doesn't matter, but we need to buy 2, and then we're going to go to Tarkly and buy Freezing Pulse. Here I'm just going to check in case there's any blue-blue-blue links for later, but we didn't hit it. The other thing to consider is that you can get Stormblast Mine instead of Freezing Pulse here. It doesn't really matter, and this is mostly a matter of personal preference. If you don't get a blue-blue-green wand, it's still pretty good to get at least one blue-green link so that you can link Frost Bomb to Onslaught support. The way you're typically going to be clearing mobs later on is by Frost Blinking onto them and then dropping Frost Bomb to finish them off, or Frost Bombing the pack that you're currently standing on and then Frost Blinking out of them and allowing the explosion to finish them off. Either way, Frost Bomb tends to be the thing that kills mobs, and that's why we want to put Onslaught on it, as it tends to be the thing that lands the killing blow and can trigger Onslaught most effectively. As you work your way through the mudflats, it's usually ideal to avoid as much combat as possible, only killing things when you stop to loot the roller nests. We don't really gain much from overleveling early in the campaign, or really at any point. In this particular run, I did, however, kill 2 few mobs, and I didn't hit level 4 by the time I got Frostblink and Frost Bomb, which was a bit of a mistake, but it wasn't that big of a deal. It only costs about 5 to 10 seconds total, I'd say. So once we make our way to Submerged Passage, we want to go straight to the waypoint and then go back down to the coast. This way we can go to the tidal island and kill Hailrake, and then we're going to log out. So the reason we do it this way is just because it's a little more efficient on the paving, and it also gives us a chance to hit level 4, which is when you can equip Frostblink and Frost Bomb, although of course, since I made the mistake, we didn't do it this time. Usually, Tidal Island is just a loop, so you just follow pretty much any path. I tend to go down. I feel like that leads me to Hailrake quicker on average, and we're going to use Freezing Pulse to just kill most of the other mobs near him to get as much experience as possible. As I said, going to fall short of level 4, which we didn't want to do. You can drag him along to pull extra mobs into his way. And so this is pretty standard Hailrake kill here. We're going to again just loot everything. or everything that's at least magic and rare. If you can't fit all the normal items into your inventory, it's not really a problem. And once you kill Heroic, you just go and log out, log back in. It just gets you back to town faster. Once you can log back in, you're going to go straight to Nessa, you're going to get Quicksilver and Onslaught. Then you're going to go to Tarkly, you're going to get Orb of Storms and Frostblink, and you're going to sell your inventory and any items that auto-equipped. The reason we're getting this particular combination of gems is because we're going to, as explained before, use Frostblink and Frostbomb to kill enemies, and of course the Quicksilver Flask is a pretty obvious choice, as it gives extra movement speed. For the time being, we're going to keep Viper Stripe as a gem for later on. We're going to use it in a vendor recipe, but we'll cover that when we get to it. Once you're done, you're going to just go straight back to Submerged Passage. Now, I made the mistake of not purchasing Frostbomb here, which is why you see we had to come back and then purchase it. Of course, we can't equip any of it because we're not level 4 yet. That's not a big deal at all. So once we're back in the Submerged Passage, we're just going to kill a few mobs so we can hit level 4 and put our setup together. Now that we got our main gem link set up, we just have to fix up our action bars real quick. And we're going to be looking for the bridge. At the bridge, you're going to use the portal scroll that always drops a Hail Rake. The reason we're going to do this is so that we can come back and kill the Dweller of the Deep later on. Leaving it till later on is just more efficient, and it tends to be a lot quicker since you can kill the Dweller faster without any risk to your character. Now, as you can see here, we're doing the strategy of dropping the Frostbomb to kill things whilst Frostblinking in or out of them when we need to. You don't want to kill everything as you move along a zone. You typically only want to do it to get a bit of experience and also to keep your flask charges up, in particular the Quicksilver Flask. Now, as we come up to the ledge is pretty juicy experience-wise, and we just have to utilize the trick of Frostbomb plus Frostblink to keep our Onslaught gem rolling, as you can see in the top left-hand corner. This way we'll be able to gain quite a bit of experience as we move through without costing us much time. In fact, we'll actually be able to keep our buffs up, keep our Quicksilver up, and move rather fast. We're going to stop here to kill some blue mobs, which was probably a little inefficient, and it's also important to note that you have to go back every time a magic or a rare item drops, or even any currency. Now the reason for that is that by the end of Act 1, we want to have 2 full Orbs of Transmutation. So that's going to be approximately about 20 magic items sold to a vendor unidentified, though less with rares factored in. And then after Act 1, in Act 2, we're going to need additional transmutes and Orbs of Alteration. So that's why this leveling path tends to be a little slower than a lot of others. It requires a lot of gems to set up, and it means you need to take your time as you go through to make sure that you're picking up everything and that you're selling things to the vendor correctly. So just a recap for Act 1, and at least until you earn the first 2 Orbs of Transmutation, you're going to be selling all your rare and magic items unidentified to get those 2 orbs quicker. You can also get the 3rd orb if you want, because that's going to get you the Flame Dash gem, but that can be earned later. There's really no rush on it because we get Smoke Mine at around level 10, and that's sufficient to use as a movement skill on its own for a while. Now, as you can see here, we've stopped for an essence. Now, the reason we stopped to kill the essence is because by the end of Act 2, we're going to need 2 essences to do our 1 craft. So this is just one of the 2. You can also substitute an essence with an alchemy orb if you find one. It doesn't matter which. We basically need to turn 2 topaz rings into rare rings. It doesn't really matter how you do it, but essences tend to be a much easier way to guarantee it, since you can see an essence on your map, rather than having to rely on dropping an alchemy orb, which tends to be rather rare in the campaign. We're also going to skip mini-bosses along the climb. We don't want to waste any time killing them. Now, when you get to the lower prison, you're going to go up first. The reason why you're going to go up is because the trial of Ascendancy tends to be here. Now, since this is a video that is going to apply to a league start situation, you're going to need to get the trial. So that's what we're going to do. Probably one of the easiest trials. Pretty simple to do. Just go around, hit the lever, and then double back. And then the trial is pretty much complete.
It moves like a killer, yet reeks of thaumaturgy.
So coming up to Brutus, we just want to assign the rest of our passive points that we have available to make the fight easier for us, and we're pretty much just going to use Frost Bomb and Freezing Pulse to do the Brutus fight. Nothing special here. If you run out of mana, it's fine to just allow yourself to die to quickly refresh your flasks. That's not really a problem. This isn't hardcore, nor is this build really hardcore viable. You're going to die quite a lot throughout the campaign, and even after that, so don't worry too much there. When Brutus gets to about half-life, I think off the top of my head, he starts spawning ads, and you can get recharged flasks off them as well. So you don't have to die, only if you run out particularly early in the fight. One other thing to consider when you're doing this Brutus fight is that Frostblink does a bit of damage as well, as you've seen, so it's okay if you have to dodge a skill to just Frostblink straight onto Brutus for a bit of extra damage, but it does put you at risk sometimes, so that's up to you whether you want to take that risk. Now, once Brutus dies, he's going to drop a bunch of items, and we really, really need those items. So we're going to loot all of them, and then we're just going to head straight for the door so that we can go back to town. Now, as you can see in this run, we couldn't fit everything in the inventory. That's okay though. It's not ideal, but at this point, we're already up an orb of transmutation, so we're closing on our second one, so which is absolutely fine. Now you're going to take the waypoint here back to town. It's typically ideal to vendor all your items here so that you can free up your inventory for the run to the Dweller of the Deep, as that's where you're going to head after vendoring. In this run, I forgot to, but that's okay. I end up deciding I'm going to pop another portal scroll and go back anyway. That cost me a bit of time, so it's obviously ideal not to do it, and I didn't really gain much out of doing it anyway, but it's not really that big a deal. Now, when you hand in the quest for having killed Brutus, you want to get added lightning support. The reason for that is for the gem setup that we're going to do at level 12. Just keep it in your bags. If you have room to put it in your gear, feel free to slot it in right away so it can start gaining experience, but we're only going to be using it for about a little more than one act. It's not that big a deal if you miss out on putting it in anything right away. Additionally, when you go back to town there, you should start looking for a triple blue link item from the vendors. Now, I didn't do it that time. It would have been ideal to do so, and if you're using the filter provided in the description to this video, it actually highlights in red any items that are triple blue linked for this reason, but it's totally fine. I believe later on in this run we come across one. Now, as you can see here, we've come across our second essence. This is really quite lucky to find 2 essences so quickly. It means that we don't have to get any essences later on, or at least until after Act 2. Now, throughout the story and in a typical run, you want to get all the essences you can from the story. This is going to help you build your lightning ones at the end of the campaign after Act 10, but if you get your first 2 early, you can typically just take a break. You don't have to earn essences again until you get the LightningSlinger set up, as doing it during early Act 3 can sometimes be a little rough or a little time wasting. So here we're going to hand in the rest of the Brutus quest to Tarkley. We're going to get Smoke Mine and obviously the skill point. Now, you're not always going to be level 10 at this point, but that's fine. Now, we also found our triple blue link here. It's a bit of a risk to buy it since it costs a transmute orb, but in this instance I'm already very close to my 3rd transmute orb, which means I could just buy this plague mask here, as I have, and then I am simply 4 shards off the 2nd transmute or 2 unidentified magic items, which I'm almost certainly going to own before I need them. And that does mean giving up early access to Flame Dash, but that's really not a big deal at all.
I scare myself.
Now, once you get to the ship graveyard, it's best to take the waypoint, and we're going to actually get use out of the waypoint. Usually Fairgraves should be near the waypoint, but in runs like this he's not, and you can just reset back to the waypoint because when you generate a new zone, he tends to be either to the left or the right of the waypoint, which allows you to find him a lot easier if you've generated an instance initially that doesn't allow you to do that. So you're just going to move through as normal into the cave. We're going to pick up the blacksmith whetstone here. Armor smith scraps and blacksmith whetstones are really important as they give you a lot of wisdom scrolls when you vendor them, and we don't really need them for our gear. We're just going to move through this as normal. Oh, we got another blacksmith whetstone there. And portal scrolls are another thing worth talking about. So you don't really need portal scrolls, since at most of the points where you need to get back to town quickly, there's a waypoint or you can log out. However, having portal scrolls does allow you to make up for mistakes, such as when you forget to vendor items. You can just pop the portal scroll, go straight back to town and vendor your items. Or there are some cases in early Act 3 where while you're setting up your LightningSlinger, such as after killing Gravicius, you can just go straight back to town there rather than having to wait for the waypoint. Now, once you get to the ship graveyard, it's best to take the waypoint, and we're going to actually get use out of the waypoint. Usually Fairgraves should be near the waypoint, but in runs like this he's not, and you can just reset back to the waypoint, because when you generate a new zone, he tends to be either to the left or the right of the waypoint, which allows you to find him a lot easier if you've generated an instance initially that doesn't allow you to do that. So you're just going to move through as normal into the cave. We're going to pick up the blacksmith whetstone here. Armor smith scraps and blacksmith whetstones are really important as they give you a lot of wisdom scrolls when you vendor them, and we don't really need them for our gear. We're just going to move through this as normal. Oh, we got another blacksmith whetstone there. And portal scrolls are another thing worth talking about. So you don't really need portal scrolls, since at most of the points where you need to get back to town quickly, there's a waypoint or you can log out. However, having portal scrolls does allow you to make up for mistakes, such as when you forget to vendor items. You can just pop the portal scroll, go straight back to town and vendor your items. Or there are some cases in early Act 3 where while you're setting up your LightningSlinger, such as after killing Gravicius, you can just go straight back to town there rather than having to wait for the waypoint.
Feel sorry for you, Fairgraves. Dying twice can't be fun.
Once you're back to town, you want to sell anything in your inventory, and you're going to get some quest rewards. Now, the gem you get here doesn't actually matter, except that it needs to be a green dexterity-based gem. As explained earlier, we're going to use this to get our topaz rings, along with the Viper Strike gem, so just make sure you don't sell them. Now, we've also fallen short of getting that second transmute. Here is where we usually buy the Arc gem with Blast Chain, as we're going to do Arc Mines throughout all of Act 2 and also for Mervale. However, we've fallen short here. Now, as I explained just previously, portal scrolls allow us to make up for mistakes, and that's what we're going to do. We're basically just going to clear our way through the Cavern of Wrath, and we're going to farm mobs, any chests that we find along the way, that sort of thing. And once we know that we have the items to vendor to get the second transmute orb, we're going to pop a portal and go straight back to town so that we can fix up our setup. So we're going to pop the portal here, go back to town and fix this setup. My filter highlighted the carved wand, as we're going to use that as part of the wand craft later on. However, we're not going to use this particular wand as a result of it being rare. We need magic wands, or normal ones that we can transmute to magic, so this one's pretty much useless to us, so we're just going to ID it and then use it to work towards our alteration orbs for next act. We're going to vendor everything while we're here.
Be well.
And we've also set up our blast chain mine support with added lightning support and arc mines into our 3 blue setup in the helm, which was why we bought the plate mask earlier on. And we're just going to now put, it's hard to see in this particular video, but you're going to put detonate mines onto your left click. This way that as you're moving, you can just pop a mine and it's going to auto detonate. Now I also recommend setting up a second force move key so that you're not only moving with left click, and the reason why is because when you're using smoke mine, if it auto detonates because you're holding down left click, it's going to give you a much shorter dash distance. And additionally, the way blast chain works is that it does more damage per mine if all your mines are detonated in a huge sequence, rather than putting one down and having it auto detonate each time you cast it, like we're doing right now. But as you saw at the start of the fight, we laid down 15 before starting the fight. That's not just to front load our damage, but also because of the way blast chain mine works. In boss fights, it tends to be ideal to just stack all your mines up and then pop them all at once. Merville is one of the only fights in the early acts that you can't do this with, Oak being the other one, and the reason why is that your mines can actually take damage and die. And Merville has quite a lot of AoE that kills mines, as does Oak with his sweep attack. This fight tends to be a little sketchy. If you have to die a couple of times, don't stress it. It's not really any kind of big deal, but don't try and greed, as I've done a couple of times here, where you can see I've tried to stack a bunch of mines for a huge detonation, and then AoE damage has come out, and I've lost a lot of my mines straight off the bat.
First dance with a lady of quality. Pity she let herself go like that.
Oh, forest. Death has too many damned places to hide in a forest.
So when you come to the forest encampment, you're going to want to go up and to the right into the old fields. This just tends to be the most efficient path to clear Act 2. Now, in this particular instance, I have forgotten to vendor. It's always important to vendor as often as you can. So we're just going to do that now real quick. I tend to prioritize identifying rare items. This gives the most amount of alteration orbs, and by selling unidentified magic items I can still earn a few orbs of transmutation, as we're going to potentially need up to 5 here. So we're going to use 1 on Flame Dash, we're going to use 2 to upgrade our wands to magic, and then up to another 2 to actually purchase the carved wands, as each carved wand we buy costs 1 orb of transmutation from the vendor, and we use carved wands in the LightningSlinger setup because they have the fastest attack speed. Now, in the old fields, you don't want to move straight on, you want to find the den. Usually it tends to be on the bottom side of the map, but some instances of the zone, it's on the top side. The reason we're going to do this is because this little side quest, although optional, gives us a second Quicksilver Flask very early on in the campaign. Having 2 Quicksilver Flasks means we don't have to stop to DPS things as often, as we can recharge our flasks twice as slow, basically. This layout tends to be pretty varied, but you can usually just work your way down until you find the Great White Beast. Now, with the Great White Beast, you want to put down Orb of Storms, and this is the approach to most bosses. You want to put down Orb of Storms and put down all your mines and then detonate them when they've hit or neared the cap of 15, as you saw there. This gives you a really large burst of damage and makes the fight very easy. As we move through the zones, however, as you've seen, we're just going to really be putting down, a few mines at a time. We're not going to focus on huge detonations. You can just pretty much stutter step your way through the zone. And after that, rather than handing in the quest right away, we're going to go to Crossroads. From Crossroads, we have to go up, down, and to the right to do 3 different objectives. And we can pretty much hand in the quest we just completed after doing any one of these 3, as we're going to need to log out at the end of each 3 pretty much to get back to town. So it's very important as you work your way through these zones to follow the path or the road. The road is a really good way to tell where you're going. We just found our first carved wand that is not rare already, or actually our second, sorry. We've now found 2, which means we have both of the wands for our wand crafts later on. That means that we're only going to need to collect 3 orbs of transmutation to finish off our gem setup, which is pretty good. So we're going to continue following the road here. It's okay to kill a few things to recharge with the Quicksilver Flask and also for experience. You don't need to keep up in levels with the zone level, but it also doesn't hurt. We won't be able to equip our crafted wands until level 20 here anyway, so the sooner you get level 20, the quicker things become a lot easier to kill. So it's not that bad if, sometimes you stop and kill a few enemies along the way. Now we're going to skip that carved wand since we already have our 2. We don't need a 3rd. Now, I made the mistake of not following the road here. I, for some reason, assumed the road was going the wrong way. However, it occurs to me that the bridge may be at the top of the zone, the one part that I didn't explore. It's pretty much, I've never actually seen the bridge not lead off the road, and at this point in the run, I realized that and double back, and sure enough, we have the bridge at the end of the road. I've never seen it spawn at this particular location at the very top, but it is what it is. Now, for all the bandits, you want to preload all your mines, and then you're going to drop an Orb of Storms, click kill, and then detonate. The detonate kills all of the initial adds and also blasts the boss with a good burst of damage, and then beyond that, you're just doing the fight as normal. Kraden doesn't have any attacks that really threaten your mines, so it's pretty safe to just stack them up if you want to. However, it's pretty important to keep in mind that if you're not pretty much spamming your mines and you're trying to reach 15, they're going to start to expire before you can hit 15 anyway, at which point it's just a DPS loss. So if you are stacking them and you're aware that you're not doing it super fast and you start to see them drop off, just detonate straight away to get what little damage you can. After you kill Kraden, you're going to log out. You're going to then go hand in the quest to Yina to pick up your Quicksilver Flask and do a lot of selling your inventory. Make sure you don't sell your carved wands here. And then after that, we're just going to head straight back to the waypoint so we can get to the crossroads, because now we have to go up or down. Now, the reason we go down is simply for a trial. So if you're not doing this on a league start, you don't have to go down at all. There's nothing to really be gained. But on a league start, yep, unfortunately, you have to go to the Fell Shrine Ruins and clear it out, or at least clear the trial out. The reason I talk to Einhar is because he does help a little bit killing stuff. Not really a big deal, and I'm not sure if it's actually worth it, but sometimes he appears to kill mobs or finish them off for me, which is nice. And again, like with the other zones in Act 2, it's just a matter of really following the road. The road will lead you exactly where you need to go, and pretty decently fast. Now, in a normal situation, I would have gone for the chest back there, but I'm aware of the fact that I'm kind of ahead of where I need to be in terms of gathering my materials. Of course, stopping for a chest does slow you down, but once you have a mine set up, you can preload your mines and do the chest rather quickly, so it's not too bad. But of course, if I can skip it, I'm going to. I don't really need the materials, and I'm quite ahead, so that's what we do. Now, we're just going to quickly clear through here, and then we're going to log out at the end of this particular part. Do not, under any circumstances, go to level 2 of the crypt. It has an optional quest which we really don't want or care about at all. The trial is on level 1, and you'll see the pop-up for the Lord's Labyrinth on the side of your screen to indicate that there is a trial in this zone rather than level 2. Once we get back to town, we're just going to go to the waypoint, we're going to go back to the crossroads as we've been doing so far, and then we're just going to go to the sort of upper part of the zone. You don't really have to follow the road on this particular path, as long as you have like an idea of the other layouts, pretty much in the opposite direction of the Fellshrine Ruins. Now, when we go to the Chamber of Sins, we're here for two reasons. We're here both for the trial and to kill Fidelitas, and they're both on level 2, if I recall correctly, so just want to clear through here as fast as possible. Usually, taking the path I've taken here is the correct way to go. This instance doesn't have a lot of variance in my experience, so if you go left, down, and around, you usually get to the part where the waypoint is, and then this is pretty much the same layout every time I find. Sometimes we don't get it, but a lot of the time we do. Now, as you can see on this zone, we have a trial to complete, so we're going to look for that first. I'm not very experienced at finding the trial here. We find an orb of alteration here, which is really lucky. They tend to be really rare, like orbs of alchemy early in the campaign. So finding one at this point means we don't have to focus as much on picking up items, and that we can pretty much be guaranteed to get what we want by the end of this act, which I believe we already do have. Now, I of course make the mistake of actually clicking this switch. You can ignore all the switches in this trial, which is something I know because I've run this 100 times, but for some reason I still sometimes make that mistake anyway. I'm just going to clear to the end of here, click the plaque, and then click the portal, and you're done. The one thing I can say in terms of navigating Chamber of Sins level 2 is that I do tend to notice that the way to go to finish off this part of the zone tends to be opposite where the entrance is. It's almost, I've never seen it close to the entrance, so as you can see here, it was quite a long way away. Now when we get here, we just want to clear the mobs out by using our mines, and preloading them tends to be an alright idea, but This boss does have some area lightning damage that ruins your ability to stack mines, so do it at your own risk. He's not particularly hard at all though, so no trouble here. Now we loot his items, we pick up the Baleful Gem, and then you want to talk to Helena to unlock your hideout after this, and you can just log straight out. Once we're back to town, from here we want to now start clearing the other side of Act 2. We don't actually have to do any of the talking I just did, but we do want to talk to Brutus to pick up some skitterbots. Now, in this run, another mistake I made was taking skitterbots but not actually at any point using them. They're pretty handy, they give you additional mine damage, and they will apply chill and shock to bosses, which is really handy on Weaver in particular, as well as Oak, but it's no big deal, we didn't have too much trouble on either boss. Now, once you get to the riverways, you want to find the waypoint, and from here you want to go up. Now, usually it's a good idea to kill Oak when you get to the wetlands, because I'm not really feeling it. I'm feeling a little weak at this point in the run, and I guess because I decided to, I'm going to skip Oak here and come back for him later on, which isn't really that big of a deal at all. So we're just going to use this to get to the waypoint, and then we're going to double back. I'm not 100% sure if actually going up but not killing Oak is the most efficient way to clear this zone. However, I'm just used to going up here in other leveling runs, so it's just something that's stuck. So once we get back to the the riverways, we're just going to continue along to the Western Forest. Now, the problem here in this run is that I make the mistake of not actually following the road properly, which I should have done. This layout tends to have quite a lot of variance as well. Even though you can tell which way to go most of the time, sometimes it throws you off quite a bit. And as you can see here, I ended up walking into a corner. So I now have to go back, find the road, as you can see here. And once we're back on the road, we find the exit to the Western Forest rather easily and quickly. Now, there's a bit of a trick to the Western Forest. You follow the path down to the waypoint, and then from the waypoint, Alira and the exit to the Weaver is going to be either to the left or the right, and you can't tell which right away. If you start moving in one direction and you find bandit type NPCs, then that's the Alira side, and if you move and you find webs around the trees, then that's the side for the Weaver. But typically, once you get the waypoint, you're just going to continue down the road anyway, as we're going to kill the mobs for the quest at the bottom of the road. So, as you can see here, we have to kill the Black Gods. It's a pretty standard fight. You just preload your mines. He doesn't really do any AoE, so your mines are fine to be detonated at the end. Once we get the thaumatic emblem, we pop it in the seal, and we're going to go back at this point to Act 1, not just to hand in the quest for the skill point, but also because this is an ideal time to pick up Flame Dash, which we didn't get earlier on. Then while we're here, we're going to do a bit of vendoring as well.
Take care.
Now while we're here, we're going to do part of the wand craft, so we're going to pick up the iron rings here, and we're also going to pick up Flame Dash. Now we're going to vend the iron rings with our 2 green skill gems to get 2 topaz rings,
Farewell.
and we can just slap our essences on them right away. We can transmute our wands, and since we have 2 alteration orbs, we could have just finished the craft here. However, we won't be able to equip our wands till level 20 anyway, so there's not a particular rush. Now, I have headed to the right after coming back to this waypoint and determined that that's the site that Weaver is on. So instead, I'm going to go the other way, because I want to kill Alira first here, so that I can then do Weaver and log out. Rather than logging out, doing Weaver, then having to come back here and then do Alira. Alira does have AoE and can kill your mines. I don't think it's as bad as some of the other bosses, and you can just throw your mines off to the side, but something to consider anyway. She's one of the easier bandits. In fact, probably the easiest. You just have to watch out for her deads really and get out of her AoE. Now, once we're done there, we're going to go back the other way towards Weaver. You can tell it's Weaver because of the webbed trees. And we're now going to head straight to Weaver's Chambers. The Weaver's Chamber zone, you're going to lose quite a bit of time on sometimes. I don't know the best way to navigate through the zone, and I do believe it's another high variance zone, but it's not too much of a problem. You can pick up a decent amount of experience along the way. Again, once we get level 20, we can equip our wands, so not such a bad idea to kill the mobs here, and given that they're just these like easy to kill spiders that don't really jump around, it's just easy experience. So at this point, we're going to finish off our wand craft, as we're closing in on level 20 and nearing the end of Act 2. In fact, we're on the final stretch. So we'll talk to Silk here. The gem you get as a reward doesn't particularly matter. We're not really going to use it. And the vendor recipe, as I've explained before, is just 2 magic wands, 2 alteration orbs, and 2 rare topaz rings. And the reason you do this is because it's going to give you 2 wands with tier 6 lightning damage added to spells, which is really strong. At the point at which you obtain it in Act 2, it's basically doubling your damage output right off the bat, and you can pretty much continue using these wands right through to the end of the campaign. It's very important for any spellcaster you level up that you're doing on a league start. You pretty much need to use this wand craft. You don't have to do it with lightning damage. You can use ruby or sapphire rings to get fire or cold damage of roughly the same amount of damage. And you can even do these crafts at lower levels although it's not particularly efficient to do so. I tend to just wait until this point in Act 2 to do them. Now when we get to Oak, we want to preload our mines. However, as you saw there, I got a little greedy and didn't detonate them all right away, and he did his sweep AoE and killed a whole bunch of them, and he continues to do so. So the correct thing to do with Oak, which I kind of do later on in the fight rather than right away, is that you're supposed to put Orb of Storms down, but then throw the mines off way to the side, where his sweep isn't able to kill them. You do run the risk of them targeting ads if you detonate them at a not ideal time, but it's not really that big of an issue. Oak tends to take a little longer than the other bandits due to his damage reduction and healing, but it's not a problem. And this is also the reason why I left Oak till a little later, because if you do Oak with a particularly low DPS setup, it's just an absolute nightmare. It's going to take a lot longer than it needs to, and on certain characters, depending on your mana costs, you may just be outright unable to kill him if you're not strong enough. Now, from there, we're just going to hand in the bandit quest and then come straight back here. So you're pretty much always going to hit level 20 in the Val Ruins, sometimes a little later and sometimes a little earlier. At that point you can just swap straight into your new ones, as we're doing here. We don't really need the old gems either, so you can just throw them all right away, depending on what you do, depending on if you have space in your links. And as you can see, our arc mines have straight away become quite a bit stronger. Just able to completely decimate white mobs in far fewer clicks.
This shadow is starting to feel a little inadequate.
Ready, exile? It is time to hunt!
Now, there's a huge delay while you're waiting on the Val Oversoul to spawn. You should use it to spend the rest of your passive points if you haven't already, and to fix up anything you need to with your inventory. Don't take too long, however, as you still need to preload your mines, and this clip is basically a really good example of spending too long fixing up your inventory. I completely failed to set up my mines in time, and as a result the fight takes, I'd say probably about 10 to 15 seconds longer than it had to. Possibly even a little more. Hard to tell. But usually I'm able to do this fight in about 10 seconds. If I preload correctly, I can instantly phase the boss and then have mines ready to go and just kill him on the second time he comes up. Now that he's dead, just pick up everything you can. Usually you're not going to be able to pick up all the loot, but that's not really a problem. As you can see here, we got to this point at about 56 minutes. In a lot of other builds, you're able to get here a lot quicker. But that's totally okay, because the slowest part of leveling this character is going to be the parts that I'm showing you here in this video. Pretty much everything after that is just a complete breeze. You'll be doing every other act in 20 minutes, even if, you're not a racer and you don't have much experience. It's just so much easier to level once you actually get LightningSlinger set up, and the hard part, as you can see, is just figuring out the steps you need to take to get up to it. Now, I believe I die here. Yep. That was rather unfortunate. Pretty much from here, just make our way up to Clarissa. Pretty standard after this. I don't, stop for a lot of the chests that you've seen. I'm not stopping for essences because I'm well ahead of where I need to be. I only need Orbs of Alteration at this point to buy the Spellslinger gems, and I believe Wave of Conviction. But other than that, I'm pretty much set on materials, and I can also start skipping rare and magic items for the time being. It's okay to pick up some here and there, because since this is League Start, you want to have some basic currencies once you hit maps. It's going to make it a lot easier to get started, and especially to do your early crafts, but no big deal either way. Now with the Crematorium, we have a couple of things to do here. First, we need to do the trial, and secondly, we need to deal with Tolman and Piety. Pretty hard to miss them, however. Just work your way around the zone. Usually you'll find the trial first, but if you don't find the trial first, just double back after Piety and find the trial, and then you can just log out after that. The trial, you may lose a bit of time on if you're not careful. It does quite a bit of fire damage over time, though with movement skills you can skip quite a lot of it, as you can see here. You're just really getting the levers and then moving through the doors once they're open. Nothing particularly hard. Now, With the piety encounter itself, you're going to need to preload your mines, which you'll see shortly. And you're going to also need to keep your distance. She does quite a lot of damage, and since we're trying to like get through here as fast as possible, we haven't picked up any lightning res. We're not particularly tanky or anything, so you can very easily die, and it's also quite punishing to die on this fight because you have to do the full run back. So as you can see on screen at the moment, we're just stacking our mines and moving forward a little bit at a time. The reason for that is the mines are going to start expiring if we were to preload them and then run up and wait for the fight to start. So by doing a bit at a time, as they expire, you're throwing down new ones, and then once it finally activates, you can just detonate them all. And as explained, we're going to keep your distance all the way here. Piety absolutely slaps. She's got like an empowered arc type ability, and it hurts quite a lot. Especially if you aren't running 2 life flasks, you can be in a spot of trouble here. As you can see, I almost died, but it's fine. Just continue keeping your distance, throwing out the arc mines, and you'll be fine in the end. Now, once you're done with her, you can pick up the crafting recipe safely, and then wait for Tolman. Although in this instance, because I hadn't killed all the mobs, I wasn't able to loot Tolman. So I lost a bit of time here waiting when I really just needed to kill that mob. Once you get Tolman's bracelet, you can just log right out and straight back in. Now once you log back in, you're going to want to head to Act 2 to pick up Wave of Conviction. If you didn't earlier, you should be able to usually get it earlier, but sometimes I don't have the ults right away, so it hasn't become a habit for me yet. Sell your entire inventory, and you can even dump some things in the stash, which I believe you'll see later, and you just want to go ahead and pick up Wave of Conviction for your Spellslinger link. And then you're going to go back to Act 3 and begin assembling the initial iteration of Spellslinger. And this is where we're going to use up the alteration orbs we've been saving. So you pretty much just need 2 copies of Spellslinger, and I make the mistake of buying conductivity here, and the reason that's a mistake is because we get conductivity for free anyway off Maramoa, which you'll see in a second. Now, once you've set up Spellslinger, you can just go right ahead and ditch all your other gems, your Arcmine setup. It's not really a problem at all. And the gist of the Spellslinger link initially is that you want to have Spellslinger linked to Arc, Wave of Conviction, and Conductivity. This is going to require 2 sets of links to do so, unless you've found a full blue setup by now, but usually you will not have. Make sure that you set them on your action bar so that you reserve both Spellslinger setups. It's going to cost most of your mana, and that's the reason why we're going to basic attack to trigger our Spellslinger setup. A lot of Spellslinger setups tend to like using Frenzy or Power Siphon, but we straight off the bat reserve 90% of our mana. We have just enough mana to Flame Dash, so it's just not really worth it trying to fit Frenzy into the build, especially since this build already, as you can see, has more than enough damage. We just blew up a rare that was ghosted without any problems. And we're just going to go straight into the sewers at this point. As you can see, you're going to collect the busts. Make sure to clear out the initial part before the crossing where the waypoint is, as you're going to lose a lot of time going back to find any busts that you may have missed, potentially. This was unfortunately a big debate of a layout. And as you can see, we're skipping a lot of the magic and rare items. We're not picking up all our currencies because at this point, our setup is almost, complete for the time being. We don't really have to make further changes to the build, and most of the changes we're going to make after this are for the sake of stats rather than actually changing our gems or anything like that. This current gem setup and our weapons don't need to be touched for a while. Although conductivity we are going to swap out for ball lightning a little later on, because we don't have ball lightning yet. We get it after killing Gravicius. We can just get away with chucking conductivity into our links. Though when we do that swap over, we're going to then take conductivity out and hardcast it, because it's still very worth using conductivity. You can also buy Assassin's Mark here, and in the endgame, Assassin's Mark is the better curse to be using. The reason for that mainly is that endgame bosses, such as Shaper and Cirrus, they gain reduced curse effectiveness to the point that it makes curses like conductivity hardly worth using. But at least for most of the campaign, we're going to just use conductivity. Now, I could have picked up that 3 blue helm back there and then alked it for stats, which was probably in hindsight a mistake, but it is what it is. When you come through here, you want to go to the catacombs, as you can see, and this is for the sake of doing the lab trial. If you're not doing this on a weak start, you can completely skip this area, as you're probably used to doing. Now once you get up to the battlefront, you want to find the waypoint and the quest item before heading off to the docks. As you can see here, we find the docks first, so we have to go back a little bit to figure out where everything else is. If you can find the docks, it's usually a little below where you're currently at. As you can see here, we find the waypoint, and then always below and to the left of that is going to be the Blackguard chest containing the ribbon spool, which is the quest item that we need. For the sake of efficiency, we just go, after we find the waypoint, we go straight back to the docks so that we can obtain the second quest item that we're going to need for the Solaris Temple. This zone is another one of those high variance zones. I tend to just go straight up and to the left, although sometimes you can get completely lost and it's in a totally different direction. We got really lucky here, we found the supply container right away, but you can sometimes expect to spend a few minutes in this zone. This zone tends to be pretty good for experience. Your LightningSlinger is absolutely slapping at this point, so you have no trouble killing mobs, and there are a few levels above you, which tends to be pretty efficient for you. In fact, it was actually a little bit unfortunate in this run that we found the supply container so fast, because we lost out quite a bit of experience, but it's not really a problem. And after this, we're just going to head straight to the Solaris Temple, and we can head from there all the way through to, what's her name, Diala. She's going to help us clear the sewer. So you're just clearing through level 1 and then through level 2 here. There's not really anywhere else, or anything else to do, I should say, and there's no need to stop to pick up a loot or anything. Make sure to kill as many of the mobs as you can here, because you're going to start falling behind on experience fast at this point, and your LightningSlinger setup has no troubles whatsoever in killing mobs.
go.
Bring me back something nice, huh? Don't do anything I would.
I'm inside the Blackguard stronghold, like a fox in a hen house.
You're not the only one who wields death as a weapon, boy.
Griffisius is pretty much the last thing we need to do before finishing off our Spellslinger setup. He may easily kill you, so you really should watch out. Make sure to use your Flame Dash to dodge his attacks. But we have more than enough damage to kill him rather quickly. Not really much else to say there. Once you kill him, you just want to move straight on to Solaris Temple before you go back to town.
Have I killed you back in all
And you
thine
just kill
years?
things along the way. So once we get here, we're now going to make the final changes to our Spellslinger setup by handing in the quest for having killed him. Now we can take Ball Lightning as a quest reward here, which we're going to do, but as you can see, we are not currently high enough level to equip it. We're in fact one full level off. So as we move through Solaris Temple, we're going to just try and kill as many things as possible to get us to level 28.
I was once off my tits for 3 days after taking bad leaf drops. Felt just like this place.
So now that we're level 28, we can just go ahead and fix up our setup, and that pretty much includes replacing conductivity in the Spellslinger setup with Ball Lightning, and then we're going to put conductivity into one of our other sockets so that we can hardcast it on bosses or tough rares. And at that point, as you can see, we took Orb of Storms out. Orb of Storms has pretty much been irrelevant ever since we switched to the Spellslinger setup. Because we're not actually casting spells, we're just triggering them. I don't believe it really does anything other than a small amount of damage played. As you can see here, we got our Spellslinger set up by the 75-minute mark, which is pretty alright. You know, usually you would hope at this point to probably be at the end of Act 3 or even the start of Act 4. As I've said, this is a little slower compared to other skills, but at this point it's just going to ramp up. The next 5 to 6 acts tend to be incredibly fast. You just pretty much have no trouble killing things. I'm going to just play the rest of this leveling run up until Piety before I stop it, so you can get a feel for how easily this kills things. And one last thing to note is that whilst we don't make any other changes for a while, when we hit around the Act 7 mark, we're going to have enough mana reservation reduction on our tree, and Spellslinger's going to have its mana cost reduced just enough for us to fit Stormbrand in. So when you get to Act 6, it's really important to pick Stormbrand up after doing Lily's quest, and then to put it into your sockets so that it starts gaining experience, so that it's actually relevant by the time you fit it into your links. And as you'll see in the leveling POB, we take a bunch of brand stuff so that once we do put it in and get some levels in it, it's a relevant part of our single target damage, and it's just going to continue ramping up from there. And that's also going to enable us to make the switch to Stormbrand much easier, since we've already taken all the brand stuff on our tree, and we don't really have to spend any Orbs of Regret. One of the reasons why we accept doing a slower leveling run here is because by not using any Orbs of Regret, pretty much the whole way, we can just transition at each point, you know, free of charge. So this is pretty much the run. I hope it was helpful.